Luda is the debut novel by comic book legend Grant Morrison. Before I started moving around a lot and living abroad through my 20s, I was a comic book addict. I bought and collected comics like they were going out of style. I was absolutely obsessed, and I am now trying to rebuild my comic book collection bit by bit. But Grant Morrison was my hero, remains one of my heroes, not just of the world of comic books, but writing and fiction and imagination and storytelling in general. Grant Morrison is a genius storyteller. Across a very lengthy and expansive career, Grant Morrison has written Superman comics, Batman comics, legendary original works, and comics that have stuck with me for years. I still think about Nameless constantly. This is probably my favorite Grant Morrison comic, and it's the one that people don't talk about enough. But Nameless is an occult science fiction trip. It is terrifying, devastating, and incredible. I love the works of Grant Morrison from the bottom of my heart. And now, after 30 plus years in the comic book industry, they have finally written their debut novel, Luda. And it is very, very Grant Morrison. If you know anything about their writing, you kind of know what to expect going into this when it comes to how it is written, how the prose works, how the characters behave. If you've never read Grant Morrison before, please check out some of their best comic books. Especially the original stuff. If you don't care about Batman and Superman, fine. Go read Nameless. Go read The Invisibles. It's all incredible stuff. Or read Luda. Grant Morrison is a Scottish writer, and they split their time between Glasgow and LA, where they work on comics and adapt comics into TV and film. And by the time this video goes up, I will have gone to an event in Glasgow where Frankie Boyle, the comedian, will have interviewed Grant Morrison. But at the time of recording, that hasn't happened yet, and I am so excited. Oh my god, I can't wait to actually see and maybe even talk to Grant Morrison. Oh, dream come true. Grant Morrison's comics are a big reason that I'm as much of a bookworm as I am. This is really, really great. Okay, kind of lost my train of thought there. Let's talk about Luda. So as I said, Grant Morrison is a Scottish writer, half the time based in Glasgow, and Luda is set kind of in Glasgow, an alternate version of Glasgow called Gasglow. And our protagonist is a 50-plus-year-old drag queen called Lucy LeBang. Lucy is a legend, a kind of pseudo-famous person, or famous in the right circles, famous in some corners of TV and theatre. They were part of a comedy troupe, kind of like Monty Python, just called The Troupe. Lucy's done musicals, she's done stage productions, she's done TV and film, and she's been in a band. She's done a lot of things. And now, as I said, she's over the age of 50, and she's been invited to do a specific kind of play. That play is called The Phantom of the Pantomime, and it's a kind of riff on the iconic Aladdin pantomime play. This production was huge at one point, and Lucy LeBang kind of made it huge, and now she is reprising her role as Widow Twankey in the iconic Aladdin, but this is the Phantom of the Pantomime, where a production of Aladdin is going on, but there is a phantom who is slowly killing off all of the actors as the play goes on, and then has to kind of fill their roles, and by the end, the phantom is playing every single role at once because they've killed everybody else. And as I said, Lucy LeBang is going to be playing Widow Twankey. When the book begins, we meet the woman who's going to be playing Aladdin. While they're rehearsing, she gets into a horrible accident. She breaks her ankle and shatters it, and it's really gross. And they've only got a few weeks until the play is due to go on, so they need to replace her. And they replace her with the titular character, Luda. Luda is a young woman. She auditions with no agent, no portfolio, no CV, no nothing. But she gets the role. And she and Lucy LeBang immediately become close. They are intrigued and kind of entranced by each other. As the blurb says, the story is going to go on, and as they rehearse, things are going to happen. Bad stuff is going to happen, and it starts to kind of mimic what happens in The Phantom of the Pantomime. People get into accidents, people get hurt, and you wonder if Luda is the cause of it. Luda seems to be a curse on this play. So it feels kind of like a thriller or a mystery story, but it's also fantastical. And that's because of Lucy LeBang herself. She has this power, something that she calls the glamour, something that she taps into in order to become herself. And it's a really difficult thing to try to grasp, and that is kind of a mainstay of Grant Morrison's storytelling, is that Morrison often presents magic and superpowers and mythology in very mystifying ways that are really hard to actually grasp and fully understand. And that is definitely true here in Luda. Lucy LeBang is a fascinating character. She's a drag queen, but she's also genderqueer. Non-binary, if you like. I'm mostly using she, her pronouns to describe her, and she talks about that a little bit. Morrison likes to play with gender. In fact, they are very much known for that. Morrison is an iconic person for many different reasons, and one of them is the way in which they play with gender and aesthetics and wardrobe and blah blah blah. And you also see that in their characters right from the 90s and maybe even earlier than that. Morrison also has a habit of putting themselves into their stories. If you read their Animal Man comic, or the fact that King Mob, the protagonist of the Invisibles comic, kind of looks like Morrison. And so I have to wonder how much of Morrison was put into Lucy LeBang. She's a fascinating character. She's of a similar age to Morrison, and I kind of imagine her looking like Morrison as well. So Lucy LeBang is a genderqueer drag queen, a performer, a legend of stage and music and so much more, especially comedy. And she talks to us about this glamour, this kind of magic that she has been able to grasp since she was a young child, that allows her to understand and see the world around her as it truly is, kind of lift the veil on things, and therefore manipulate it and present herself in a way that captivates people, that mesmerizes her audience. Glamour as a concept, glamour as a thing that we generally use, is a magic in and of itself. It's a fascinating way of looking at magic, and it kind of reminds me of Tolkien. The way that Tolkien didn't have magic wands in his stories, but rather people who subtly manipulated physics and the weather and the world around us. That's how it feels. It's enigmatic, difficult to grab hold of. And Luda is fascinated by this. She is absolutely desperate to get her hands on the glamour. For the first half of the novel, she's just begging Lucy to teach her how the glamour works and what exactly it even is. It's driving her insane. And as she and Lucy are getting closer and spending time together and even having sex, and Lucy is slowly turning Luda into her protege, but also becoming kind of afraid of her and nervous of her, the play is steadily becoming a disaster as bad things start to happen. Bad luck strikes this play everywhere. I am amazed and thrilled at the fact that Grant Morrison has written a novel about drag queens, about the theatre, about occult magic, and all of those things smushed together in an alternate version of the city I've just moved to. It's so great. Now, the way the novel is structured, Lucy LeBang is our first-person narrator protagonist, and she likes to waffle. If you ever read Morrison's comics, you know that they have a particular way with words that can become kind of convoluted. I've read dozens of Grant Morrison comics where I get confused about what exactly is going on, because sometimes a character will speak and another character will respond to them in a way that doesn't really match up and feels like they're on different wavelengths. That very much remains true here with Luda. Right from page 1, Lucy LeBang narrates this how she sees fit. This is a book that probably didn't get much editing. Morrison was probably free to write exactly how they want, and this is what we get. Lucy is a narrator that just goes on and on. She is constantly moving from one track to another, to another, to another. She will describe a situation or a person with a very clever metaphor, and then another metaphor, and then another one, and then another one. And then you realize that 2 pages have gone by as this character has just continued to describe the same thing over and over in different ways. That kind of writing style will not be for everyone. In fact, it might annoy you. It annoyed me at times. Like, I love Morrison, I think I've made that very clear, but they really like to just run on and continue to express themselves however they see fit. There is an ADHD to the writing here. Lucy LeBang is just waxing on and on and on for as long as she likes about whatever. And I do think that this book could have been half the length if a lot of Lucy's inner monologue had just been reined in a little bit. I don't know if you can tell, but I have just moved into a new flat and I am trying desperately hard to wrangle with the light. There is an enormous window here, clouds are going by, and my light is... It's changing now, it's changing constantly. The amount of light is constantly shifting. This is very annoying. Oh my god. Oh my god. Ah! The best way to demonstrate what I mean about Morrison's way of ADHD writing and just spinning out of control is to just read you the first page or so, and you'll get an idea of what I mean, and I think you'll immediately know if this style of writing will annoy you or entrance you. For me, it entranced me for the first half, and in the second half I kind of went, okay, we could do with maybe picking up the pace a little bit. This is not a perfect novel. I might love and revere the writings of Grant Morrison, but they really needed a little bit of editing and tucking and tightening here. Tucking, because drag. Okay, so this is page 1. Where to begin? That's the big question. I hope you'll agree. You, me, where do any of us begin? Face it, an ill-judged wink across a crowded dance floor invites a lifetime of school bills. An inebriated fumble in the dark, on the playing field, in the cloakroom, gets the same job done just as well. Even you, hearing this, you might be the product of a case of mistaken identity that wound up in the maternity ward. I'm not judging. Judging is your job. You'll have to reach a verdict after all the evidence in the case has been presented. That's how it works. Off we go, the pistol cracks, jump-starting a spirited, high-heeled lunge from the starting blocks as we jostle for position in the human race, digging in for the long haul, and what starts as a marathon sprint winds down over decades until it's a 100-meter medicated crawl to the finish line. That's what you'd say if you were trying to be clever, I suppose. Lucky me, I don't have to try. I've got the front stalls and the balcony eating out of my handbag most nights. I can bat an eye, purse my lips, and bring the house down like a drone strike any night of the week. Tonight happens to be a Wednesday. Like yours truly, it can go one way or the other on a Wednesday. But the weather's rotten outside, as my dripping, demoralised umbrella will confirm, and that's generally enough to guarantee a packed hall for the orchestra pit to the gods and nosebleeds. So if you ask me, and on the clear understanding there's nobody else here in the dressing room, you may as well take the plunge. It doesn't matter where to begin, does it, babes? So much of what I just read was completely unnecessary. Entirely. But it was beautiful. It was intense, it was playful, it was charming, and every single page is like that. There are definitely pages upon pages in this book where entire paragraphs could have been shortened to a sentence, or maybe even like a word. This is eccentricity at its highest peak. This is magnitudes of playfulness and camp, and the character speaking how she wants to, and nobody telling her to stop. She is narrating it to us, and we are there to listen, and if we don't like it, we can fuck off. It is up to you whether you care about Lucy LeBang's story, her narrative, her mind, her personality, and the way she speaks. I'd also really like to emphasize the genderqueer aspect of this book, because Lucy LeBang is a genderqueer drag queen, but I haven't mentioned the fact that Luda is also assigned male at birth. Traditionally, in the Aladdin pantomime, Widow Twankey is played by a man in drag, and that's basically what Lucy LeBang is. And Aladdin is played by a young woman who looks the part of a pretty prince. And Luda gets that role despite the fact that Luda is also assigned male at birth and therefore a genderqueer drag queen. But this book is about playing with gender. And as you get to know these two characters, you get very confused about what is real and who is real and what is what, and gender gets completely beaten down and bloodied. The lines get blurred, and it's so joyous, especially for me as a trans person who has struggled with identity issues for years and years. It's so refreshing, especially seeing this from a writer who's now over the age of 60 and has always, throughout their entire career, played with gender. In fact, I, like most people, have used he/him pronouns for Grant Morrison, but the blurb and all of the promotional stuff that I was given for this book used they/them pronouns. So I did a bit of digging, and they said that they were welcomed into the non-binary community, and they were very happy about that, but don't get your hopes up because they don't like labels and they don't really care, and they might shrug all of this off at any point. So I'm using they, them. Maybe Grant doesn't care. I don't know. I've never met them. For a fan of Grant's writing, Luda really feels like a culmination. It feels like them exploring things that they love and they find fascinating all at once. Drag, occult magic, of which Morrison is an actual practitioner, and genderqueer performance, and also the city of Glasgow. This is everything that Grant Morrison knows and loves put into a novel. And for that reason, it does feel kind of excessive. I would call it self-indulgent. And I think that sometimes self-indulgent literature, actually a lot of the time, it is grinding, it is exhausting, and I don't want anything to do with it. But when you're a writer with as much clout and imagination as Grant Morrison, when you can write as beautifully as they can, you get to be a bit self-indulgent. It's kind of like reading the works of Oscar Wilde, a man who fully knew that he was indulgent. A man who loved indulging in things, a man who loved art and beauty and the written word, and indulged in all of that in all of his writings. Morrison is doing the exact same thing here, and I'm not bothered about comparing Grant Morrison to Oscar Wilde, and I don't know if I'm the first person to do that, but there is definitely an overlap to be seen here in the indulgent manner of writing here, and the fact that this is a kind of bloated novel that could have been a lot shorter, but it isn't shorter. And Morrison decided that, and great. You either deal with it or you don't. I could talk about Luda for hours. It's a fascinating novel. It's a simple mystery with a lot of weird stuff piled on top, a little bit of magic, a little bit of occultism, well, a lot of occultism. And it's a real love letter to drag and to theatre and to pantomime and to the ability of individuals to transform themselves however they see fit. The lines of reality blur completely in this novel, and it is beautiful to behold. Luda is a trip. It is written in a very indulgent way, just like the works of Oscar Wilde. If you don't like that, don't read it. If you love the idea of reading a mystery story that plays with fantasy, that plays with reality, that embraces genderqueer identities and drag culture and pantomime and theatre in general, you're going to absolutely love this. Lucy LeBang is an incredible narrator. Luda is a fascinating, enigmatic, terrifying villain protagonist thing. It's a wild novel. Grant Morrison has wowed me for 15, 20 years of my life, and their debut novel did not disappoint. Luda is something else. I really think this is going to be a Marmite story, a love it or hate it kind of a novel, and I loved it. While having issues and completely understanding that it is self-indulgent, it is bloated, it is quite confusing and trippy and strange a lot of the time, but hang in there and you will enjoy it. Surrealism, nightmares, dreams, reality being bent, it's all part of the fun. It's all part of the theatre, and you'll love it if you let yourself. Like everything else Grant Morrison has ever written, I have loved it and had issues with it, been frustrated by it, but ultimately been entranced by it. It's a wild ride, and I really encourage you to take it. Subscribe for books.